you talked about the process. So someone decides they want to do that. Like what is the process to cold start a practice? What goes into that?
How much time do we have, Yvonne?
I cut it at 5 hours, so we got about 4.5
We're
more.
gonna cut it on.
Yeah.
No, look, what we're gonna do today is we're gonna keep it kind of high level, but I
Okay.
will invite everyone as we're going through this process, as Yvonne and I are now gonna have this conversation about exactly what the process looks like. Take some notes, revisit this podcast, put the time in, reach out to your peers, reach out to Yvonne, reach out to myself. So we are going to keep this very high level, but know that it's when you start to really dig into these granular areas of each of these phases of the cold start process that you come to really see that blueprint come together and see that vision manifest itself to reality. So that being said, you're going to want to look at the cold start process as three phases, right? And those three phases are pretty simple, right? There's the planning phase, there's the development phase, and there's the launch phase, okay? So again, keeping it very rather high level, your planning phase is going to consist of financial forecast, feasibility analysis, constructing your business plan, really digging deep into yourself as a provider, as a visionary for your private practice, what truly is the scope of care that you would like to provide in your community. So those are the types of things you dig into in the planning phase. And mind you, Yvonne, we can visit each of these phases more in depth. I'll
Yep.
start with just kind of intro high level, right? So your planning phase is where we're starting to get ideas on paper, composing your business plan, developing your financial forecast and feasibility analysis, developing your master budget 1.0. And I cannot stress that enough. That master budget needs to start somewhere, but it also becomes a living, breathing tool as well, right? So the planning phase, the goal here is really to put in all of the work, the elbow grease, as my late grandfather would say, put in the elbow grease to position you to be able to go sit down with a bank and start talking about what type of financing you can secure, okay? So that's gonna be phase one, is the planning phase, right? From there, we then venture into phase two. And phase two of your cold start process is the development phase, right? So this is where you take what was originally set out in blueprint in your planning phase, and what were some very conservative estimates structured within your financial forecast and feasibility analysis. And the development phase is where the stuff starts to become a bit more concrete. The development phase is composed of two key areas, those being your office location and build out. And look, we could have a 5-hour conversation purely centered around, the optimal location for a practice based on local socioeconomic trends and a whole wealth of research that really goes into kind of finding what is that ideal location, right? But it doesn't stop there, because not only it's finding a location, but then building out and optimizing the design of your office to fit, again, that scope of care that you're wanting to provide. The other key piece of that development phase, right? So where you got office location and build out, that other key piece has to do with technology and equipment, right? So this, once again, is all a reflection of your vision for your practice and that scope of care, right? Obviously, a boutique dry eye specialty day spa with independent optical offerings is going to be created radically different from that family routine and medical eye care with an emphasis on pediatrics and myopia control, right? So when you get into this development phase, this is where you're taking what was originally structured in your planning, in your business plan, all the financial modeling. Then you're taking that step into starting to create the concrete business in the context of the office, in the context of the technologies and equipment that you're building the space out with. So what started as planning and then transitions into development, right? As this development process is taking place, then you start to really focus on this third piece, which is all about launch. And the launch of your practice revolves around your standard operating procedures, your people, and your marketing strategy. And see, it's interesting as we're having this conversation, Yvonne, and I'm noticing myself, and I want to encourage the listeners to not think of these three phases as sort of these clearly defined components where like there's a line in the sand where you cross the step into one phase. Because the fact of the matter is this: to collaborate with that emerging private practitioner today and to be having conversations on how we're going to get them to opening 12, perhaps 9, perhaps as soon as 6 months from now, right? And by the way, there are a lot of variables that play into exactly how long it will take to launch, right? But understand that it's in the context of that process that these phases to some degree will overlap, right? And particularly when you're talking about development and launch, right? So while this development phase is unfolding and your practice is coming to reality, you've got the contractors involved, renovating your space. We've got equipment being sourced. It's really starting to see things take shape within the physical office. It's imperative that we focus on that launch piece, right? Mm-hmm. Your standard operating procedures, which must be addressed, documented, and aligned on prior to recruiting and training your people, right? We don't want to be making decisions while we're the first day we've got people in the job. We want to have all that stuff already in line, already documented, right? Transition to bringing on people, which also includes human resource and that kind of whole world, which is a for some, it's not a very exciting world. Fortunately for us, we've got a great team with great people that are proficient in those areas, right? So getting all the HR house in order, then training your people on your standard operating procedures. And in the context of all of this, also have your marketing strategy really take flight. And that's something we have observed better sooner rather than later, right? So like when we're working with clients, I mean, when we're looking at like 90 days from launch, yeah, we're starting to really get into developing that marketing strategy, building that digital presence, kind of all these things that play into having you hit the ground and delivering what we call the high velocity launch.
Got it. Yeah, and I can imagine that as you're opening doors, you want to already be a well-oiled machine operationally. Like you said, you want to have those operating procedures and training done ahead of time, and you're ready to market as those doors are opening. And one of my questions was going to be, how long does that take? And you mentioned there's a lot of variables that fit into that. It could be anywhere from 6 months to 12 months, maybe even further out. Let's dig into these a little bit more.